Uncle Claude here. This is going to be a very special upload that I'm doing. We all know that hip hop just celebrated its 50th birthday, well, its 50th anniversary this past Friday. And they talked a lot about the five boroughs, and rightfully so. They talked about down south. They talked about, of course, the West Coast, Chicago. Listen, hip hop is universal. There's no question about it. It has taken on such a worldwide phenomenon over these 50 years. But one story that really wasn't told, and as you see, I'm highlighting actually 3 cities in lower Westchester County. If you've been subscribed to me anytime, you know that I was born and raised in Mount Vernon. And Mount Vernon is the home of the great Denzel Washington, Art Carney from The Honeymooners. Everybody remembers Ralph Norton. And, of course, another generation gone by, Dick Clark from American Bandstand. But when it comes to hip-hop royalty, Mount Vernon also has brought us probably 3 of its greatest figures. One, obviously, a great artist. And he also did A&R as well later on in his career. The other two of the most important moguls in hip-hop histories. And I haven't even gotten to Yonkers and New Rochelle. But let's start, for the sake of this story, in my hometown, Mount Vernon, New York. Back in the early 80s, there was a rap group called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll was Andre Harrell, and Mr. Hyde is Alonzo Brown. Now, they put out a couple of songs back in the day. In fact, their biggest song was Genius Rap. And I remember them because they were part of the early Fresh Fest in the mid-'80s. In fact, it was Jekyll and Hyde. In fact, this was back in Memorial Field. And I want to say about 1985. It was Jekyll and Hyde, the Fat Boys, Houdini, and it was headlined by Run DMC. Now, they lasted from 1980 to 1987. Mr. Hyde, or Alonzo Brown, he ended up being an executive producer for the Judge Mathis show. But there would be other things as far as hip-hop and R&B when it comes to Andre Harrell. Andre Harrell would start his own record label. And if you remember, it was named Uptown Records. And we all remember how great Uptown Records was. And one of his first acts that he signed came out of Mount Vernon, New York. His name was Dwight Myers, but we know him so much better as Heavy D. And of course, Heavy D and the Boys. Heavy D with G Wiz, Trouble T. Roy, and Eddie F. Eddie F. would do his own thing with the Untouchables, and he's still producing to this day. We already know what Heavy D meant. I definitely know what he meant to Mount Vernon, because he actually put Mount Vernon on the map. A lot of people were not claiming Mount Vernon, but Heavy D made it proud to be from Mount Vernon. In fact, he's the guy who coined the term money earned in Mount Vernon. Hard to believe it's been all those years when he first came out, back in 1986. And it's funny because that's when hip hop really became the driving force that it became. It's because of guys like Heavy D, of course, Rakim, KRS-One. I can't forget, of course, the great Big Daddy Kane, guys like Public Enemy, of course, LL. You know, rap was becoming the big phenomenon that it has become today. And largely due to guys like Heavy D, who even your grandparents and your parents could listen to. Something that is glaringly lacking in today's hip hop. Because you could be cool and listen to Heavy D and not think, oh, you soft. It wasn't like, for example, a Will Smith. Not that Will Smith was terrible on the mic, but you could tell he was pretty generic. Where Heavy D had considerably more skills than the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Just my opinion. Now, Heavy D hired this guy. I don't know if anybody's really heard of him. He was a promoter back in the day. He went to Mount St. Michael Academy in the Bronx. He was actually born in Mount Vernon, but raised in Harlem. I don't know whatever really happened. I know that Andre Harrell had hired him at the behest because Heavy D decided to make sure that he got in. He was Andre Harrell's assistant. Ended up getting fired. And he started a label of his own. He has some pretty good artists, you know, guys like the Notorious B.I.G., Craig Mack, Little Kim, Mace. I guess he did all right for himself. Let me stop BSing. We already know this is one of hip-hop, if not music's, one of the most polarizing figures in the history of rap music, aka hip-hop, and we know that is the great Sean P. Diddy Combs. And whether you like him or not, we have to acknowledge his place in hip-hop history. And he was definitely brought to us by the late, great Heavy D and the late, great Andre Harrell. So Mount Vernon is definitely intact. But you know what? It doesn't stop here when it comes to Mount Vernon, because when it comes to Heavy D's family tree, he had a cousin who became a very good, if not, well, let's face it, he's a great producer and one of the all-time super producers in hip-hop history. This is one of the great duos in hip-hop history. The great Pete Rock and CL Smooth. When they came on the scene, I mean, it was definitely a game changer. And I still remember their very first single, The Creator. And it was funny because Pete Rock was mainly on the mic, not so much CL Smooth in that one. But nevertheless, I mean, it spawned so many classics. Becca and the Soul Brother, what a classic album that was. And so many others. And of course, they'll be forever known for the tribute that they did for the late Trouble T. Roy, Troy Dixon, who had a huge crush on my sister, but that's another story. When they reminisce over you, my God. That's one of those songs that is just timeless. And Pete Rock has done so many other works outside of the work that he did for CL Smooth. He's done so many works for other artists, so many remixes. And again, this all came from Heavy D, Andre Harrell, and friends. That basically is how Mount Vernon got put on the map as far as hip-hop royalty. But I also mentioned Yonkers, and I mentioned New Rochelle. But you know what? I'm going to go to New Rochelle first. Because I'm going to bring up a guy who is criminally underrated when it comes to hip-hop. Back in the mid-'80s, Grand Puba Maxwell was part of a group called Masters of Ceremony, and they had a couple of decent hits back in the day. I remember the song Cracked Out because it was him and Don Barron. No, it was him and Doctor Who. Don Barron was part of the other song, their bigger song, Sexy. Now, that group disbanded in the late 80s. And Grand Puba did a few solo joints. That was actually after, but before the solo joints, he formed another group called Brand Nubian. I could very well make a case that Brand Nubian is the greatest conscious rap group of all time. Now, I know that I'm going to get some pushback because a lot of people like X-Clan, and I'm one of them. I was a huge fan of Professor X, God rest his soul. And of course, Public Enemy gets a lot of play. When I look at BDP, it's really KRS-One, so I look at him as a solo artist mainly, especially without Scott LaRock. But when it comes to pure conscious rap, I don't think anybody did it better than Brand Nubian, especially that album, One for All. That's an album that you can listen to right now and make a case that it is more prevalent and more necessary now in 2023 than it was when it came out. Even though we were going through some things then. But man, these brothers really, I'm just such a huge fan of Brand Nubian. And they still tour. In fact, they were on stage over the weekend. And they definitely have represented New Rochelle very, very well. But now it's time to go to Yonkers. And Yonkers, of course, has contributed so much to hip-hop. And we already know where it really starts, ladies and gentlemen. Even though she isn't really a rapper per se, she is definitely the queen of hip-hop soul. And she was also brought to us by P. Diddy, Uptown Records, and to a lesser extent, Grand Puba, because he introduced us on the What's the 411. We know how Mary J. has definitely persevered, and she's been through all the ups and downs, just as hip-hop has been through the ups and downs. And she will always be hip-hop and R&B royalty. Even Whitney Houston herself acknowledged that she is the queen of hip-hop soul, and she only regarded Mary J. Blige as a real threat. Well, not a threat to her career, but she admired Mary J. Blige's career. And she definitely opened the doors for Yonkers as far as hip-hop is concerned. And we all know what that led up to later on. Ironically, this was their last song together. Of course, this is DMX and the Lox, Sheik Luke, Styles P, and of course, Jadakiss. We already know what these guys mean to hip-hop. It's about as true to hip-hop as it gets when you're listening to these guys. And if you don't believe me, even their last song, Ain't About Ish, definitely hit hard. And it definitely stopped everything when they were filming in Harlem. And that was in, I believe, 2021. Now, a few months after that, unfortunately, we lost DMX. And he'll always be the king of Yonkers, the uncrowned king. But he didn't need a crown because he already had everybody's respect. Anyway, that's the story of how 3 cities in Westchester County contributed to what we consider hip-hop today. And may its place never, ever be forgotten in the annals of hip-hop. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. UncleClaude signing out. Take care. Stay safe. And rest in paradise to DMX, Andre Harrell, Trouble T. Roy, and of course, the wonderful Heavy D. Take care, everyone.